Good morning. This is the third week of class. This is the second online lecture for research. One of the things we always want to consider is why do we bother to do research in social work? So when you look at this chapter, one of the things you're going to see is there are different kinds of research. One would be a descriptive study, where you're just telling about what it is that's going on, what you're looking at. Then you would have an explanatory study that says, this is what is happening in this study. An evaluative study is going to sit down and look at, okay, how do we know it was effective? So we have these different kinds of studies. The last one, an exploratory study, is looking into why things might be happening. So you're going to describe it, explain it, evaluate it. Exploratory is actually one of those where you're guessing what might be going on. Why do we want to do these things? Well, one of the most important issues is program evaluation. So when we begin to look at what's working in a program, you have to understand the various aspects of research. The other part for you each day that you go to work as a social worker will be an intervention evaluation. How do you know each time you're working with a client that that it's working, that it's helping them? So these are all important things. The text has, or the PowerPoints have, examples of each one of these things. A program evaluation is a little more complicated, but it may be something that you're asked to do, even as a social work student. We've had other students do that. Here's an example. You're the social work student at CPS, and your supervisor comes in and goes, we need to understand, we need to look at how many people have accomplished the goal of foster care for 6 months successfully. And they ask you to go do the study, to go do the research. That doesn't sound particularly complicated, but it is research, and it's important to do it right because you want to be able to address what's going on, why it's happening, how it's happening, all of those things. So it's important to think about research in that way. It's important to know the difference between quantitative and qualitative. Quantity is a number of things, an amount of things. So a quantitative study is going to be specifically counting, measuring those particular things that you're examining, okay? That's a quantitative study. So you're going to look at the quantity of something. How many times did the person feel depressed? How many times did the kid at the school get in trouble with the teacher? That's quantitative. Qualitative is how people feel about things. What's the quality of it? It's a different kind of research because qualitative research stops and looks at, okay, how did the person experience it? It's more subjective in that the quality of their experience matters. You've been asked this a number of times. It's a qualitative assessment when you post to Yelp and they say, how many stars do you want to give it? And you say, well, I want to give it 2 stars because I went in there, they were rude, okay, that's subjective. You felt they were rude. Somebody else may feel differently. That's a qualitative research measure. And what you want to make sure of is that you're aware of which one you're trying to use. If you want to measure the success of practice, then you're going to use a quantitative measure, and you may measure how many times people come to keep their appointments. Do they take their medications? Do they go to parenting classes? Whatever that might be. Those things you can count. When you start asking questions about how successful do you think, believe, feel this process has been, now it becomes qualitative. You do this every semester when you fill out a form about your professors. It's a qualitative measure. It should change and needs to change to a quantitative measure, which says, did the professor come to class? Did the professor follow the syllabus? Did the professor answer your questions? Those are quantitative things that you can then sit down and go, okay, well, this professor never came to class, or this professor always came to class, or this professor always gave us a syllabus. What happens usually is it's how students feel about the professor. Do you think your professor communicated clearly? Well, that's opinion, so that's qualitative. And the problem is, for college professors especially, what we've discovered over the years is that students who are making a good grade in class give good assessments, and students who are making bad grades in class give bad assessments. Not a surprise, but that's the difference between relying on quantitative versus qualitative research. So, in the first research class, I talked to you about learning to ask good questions. This kind of research class is talking about how you go about checking the answers to those questions to see which ones are the best answers. Okay? So, first of all, you gotta develop a research question. If you're gonna do something, and that could be sitting with a client and saying, okay, we've had this assessment. What do you think we need to do? What would help you? And then you develop a research question that says, in this case, Mrs. Johnson will take her antidepressant on a regular basis every week. Okay? And that, the research question is, taking the antidepressant will ease her depression. And then the PowerPoints and all of those have good examples. And then the study method. How are you going to go about looking at this question and measuring the answers you come up with? That's called the intervention. You have to have a way to collect data. And that can be as simple as counting the number of times people keep their appointments, to behavioral checks if you're a school social worker, those sorts of things. When we talk about all of these issues, when we talk about the important things of research, understand that you do research every single time you go to work. You do research every day when you get up. You don't call it that, but when you're coming up with the research question, what makeup should I wear today? Now your research question is, I think if I wear this particular makeup, I'll get that job that I'm looking for, or I'll have people compliment me, whatever it might be. So we do it every day. We just don't really call it research. And one of the problems for research professors is they don't make it here and now. Research is a step-by-step decision-making process. It's the same thing as the generalist method or generalist process for doing social work. As always, it's important that you ask questions, that you check in, that you make sure that you can get the information you need. Again, the PowerPoints are there. These videos I'm posting there. All of this is important for you to have in order for you to be able to move forward in this class. I will tell you, if you don't do the work in the class, you're simply not going to pass. If you don't pass, now you put yourself behind in the program, and that's going to be a problem. So be sure and watch the videos, be sure and answer the questions, do the work, keep the work on time, and you'll do fine.